Welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Bargman. A few years ago, I wrote and performed a solo show called The Edge of Every Day, which was an exploration of the rough edges and contradictions we all face and grapple with. The show hit a nerve, and the relevance of the topic would only grow over time more than I could have foreseen. So, here we are. Real talk with real people, sharing stories and perspectives that spark provocative invitations to leap out of what's safe, on the edge of every day. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on the edge of every day here on talkradio.nyc. Tonight, we are live in the hive with author and UN humanitarian Trudy E. Bauer for our 55th episode entitled The Hunger Paradox. For those of you who have become loyal listeners here on the Edge of Every Day, thank you so much for spending time with me and my guests. Our numbers keep growing, and I have you to thank. I couldn't do it without you. So please continue to share this podcast with friends and family, and take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Sandra Bargman, on the Edge of Every Day. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to the Edge. If you like what you hear and you want to check out my past episodes with my inspiring guests, you can find them on talkradio.nyc, on your favorite podcast platforms, and on my YouTube channel. Again, that's Sandra Bargman, on the Edge of Every Day. This show is about pushing boundaries and exploring rough edges. Through conversations and shared stories with friends and colleagues, it's my hope that we can begin to understand our edges. And what I mean by edges is those places where we are fearful. Those places where we are resistant to change, those places where paradoxes and contradictions live in our beliefs and in our understandings, both about ourselves and about the world around us. Listen, we live in edgy, tumultuous times, and people are complex. The more we recognize our own edges and get real about them, the more we can help others to do the same. And that, I fully believe, can help to change the world. So thanks again for tuning in. And without further ado, it is time to introduce our guest this week. A native of Princeton, New Jersey, Trudy E. Bauer studied French literature at Smith College and international affairs at Columbia University. Inspired by the writings of Victor Hugo and an internship at the United Nations in New York, she embarked on an overseas career with CARE, Cooperative for Assistance and Relief Everywhere, and the UN World Food Program, spanning 30 years, where her interests in social justice, languages, and travel intersected. She managed food assistance programs in India, Bangladesh, Mozambique, Burundi, Madagascar, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana, the latter two as country director. Her most challenging assignments were working in countries where political instability and violence coexisted with managing food emergencies and raising her two daughters. In 2011, Trudy began co-authoring The Hunger Crime. She has contributed articles to 2 published works of nonfiction. This is her first work of fiction. Hello and welcome, Trudy Bauer. You're going to need to unmute, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Reverend Sandra. And
please just call me Sandra. I appreciate that.
This is my first live interview, so it will be a new experience.
Yay! Very exciting. You're diving right in. Well, you have so much to share with the world. So I know that this must be a wee bit unnerving for you, but I appreciate you just plowing through and doing it, because I know you're going to have to do a bunch of them. So I'm happy to be your guinea pig.
I'm very happy you are.
Aw. Well, I'm truly thrilled that you're here, Trudy. And your work is incredible in the world, and I can't wait to share it with our listeners. But I like to start out my show first and foremost to share how I know my guests. And I don't know you personally, but I've met you through Sam Leibowitz, our fearless leader here at talkradio.nyc, and you can check out his show, The Conscious Consultant, on Thursdays. But do you know Sam personally?
Yes, I've been in some workshops with him.
Oh, I love that. He's a great guy. We love him. And well, so of course you came very highly recommended. And then when we had our lovely pre-chat, you and I just clicked, and I was so blown away by, I knew that I so wanted you on the show because I felt like I was one of the listeners, that I really somehow had not kept this whole crisis on my radar. Like so many people. That's why it's so important to me to have you on the show, that I was kind of overwhelmed at how little I knew. So it's beautiful that you're coming on and going to mentor us through this process and inspire all of us to learn more about this crisis. So before we dive into it, one of my questions that I like to ask all of my guests, because it's an interesting question to me to watch how my guests answer it. We all do so many things in this world, and we've traveled all of these paths. And in today's world, we are re-examining what identity even means. So my question to you and to all of my guests is, what identity do you, Trudy, lead with in the world?
I have been reflecting on that, and my calling, my vocation became a humanitarian. And it was after retiring early in 2012, so I have not been working for a decade, that I realized I'm still called to service as a humanitarian, and I'm searching how to serve now without the institution. And that's when
the auspices of that, yeah, makes sense.
Maybe the book would be an advocacy tool, a way of finding my networks to address hunger in a different way without being on the front lines myself, because I've done that, and my nervous system is very happy to rest for a bit.
To have a break. Well, yeah, I mean, not being on the front lines, absolutely, but continuing to do your service work that you've been called. I love that. Humanitarian is the identity that you lead with. Of course, you popped out of the womb, I'm sure, with a sense of service to the world, and that has inspired you to go into all of this work. So tell us, before we dive into hunger and what hunger is and what the hunger paradox is, how did you did a internship at the UN. Was your goal to work on the hunger crisis?
It wasn't a goal at that time. I really was inspired by the French literature, and everyone knows Les Mis.
Les Miserables.
Because it was the story I read in French, and the story of Jean Valjean, who's condemned for 20 years for stealing a loaf of bread, and the great discrepancies between rich and poor, and how she had to prostitute herself to raise her child. So it's about the wretched poor, and it always stuck with me. And then I was focusing on languages, and then I took some courses in international affairs, and then I got a master's at Columbia. And I really loved international affairs, focusing on economic development. So the newly independent countries from the colonial powers were needing technical support and different types of support in developing their own social safety nets, their own capacities in all these areas that had been led by colonial administrators. So I was on the cusp of that post-colonial helping
Shift,
to
awakening.
because my first post in Africa was in Mozambique. It had only been independent 10 years. So it was very exciting and optimistic. It was a very optimistic time, even though there was a lot of wars, but people had hope. People had hope. So I'm saying I went from international affairs and I went to the UN and I met a lot of the peacemakers. I saw Willy Brandt, who was making overtures to East Germany. Many of you don't know about that, but he made the rapprochement between East and West Germany that had been separated by World War II. And then I would see like Jimmy Carter and Andrew Young. So I really, I just felt a connection with the peacemakers and the social justice. So these things led me, when I had a job, I wrote job letters and I had 3 offers. One was in the Department of Commerce, one was going to Japan, and one was going to India with CARE as an intern. And I just gravitated to going to India with CARE as an intern. Not even a job.
Interesting. Wait, did you feel a calling to the Indian culture as well?
Well, I was a bit
sort of a visceral connection.
Not at the beginning, no, but one of our professors had been ambassador there, so he gave me a lot of background. So I really was looking forward to it, and I loved that year in India. And I was 25, and I learned so much about, you know, community initiative and the discrepancies between the very rich and the very poor. And it was such a rich culture, and nobody knew about its rich history and its achievements in physics and science. And, you know, it's a whole undiscovered world there. And it was really fascinating.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, the time that you went there, you've witnessed an incredible global shift in people's understanding of what of a global community, of knowing what's happening around the world.
Yes, I've seen countries go forward, and I've seen countries go backward, and many of the countries I had been in were among the least developed, and they had challenges politically. I enjoyed every post for different reasons, and I most loved connecting with the communities and my female counterparts, and I really felt we were making a difference. Whatever program it was reforestation, or it was, my favorite was school feeding, because you're investing in a child in the present, getting so they learn, they stay in school, they don't drop out, they get married later, particularly girls, and especially girls. And then
especially girls are beautiful.
So that for me is my cause, really, girls' education, because I saw what a difference it made. And I think we accomplished so much, and you feel it at the community level, whereas at a political level, you might think it's too daunting. Like in our world today, the challenges at the political level seem overwhelming. But you kind of have to drill down and find the place, your entry point, to make a difference, where no matter what happened in my life, what happened in the world, I would go home and say, I fed a kid in school today. So just got to find your gift and what's your entry point, and where you can make a difference, because the global picture
can feel overwhelming.
Overwhelming, as was your question.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. It can be quite simply answered, or it's very complex, and most people feel powerless, as I do, on how to make a difference in all systems and the politics and the players, and who are the players. But it's beyond most of us to penetrate that.
Well, and if it's overwhelming, we don't stay attached to hope. And the goal is to stay attached to hope, and which keeps us making choices and taking steps and action, and to be okay with, to your point, these small, what may feel like small steps, are enormous. If all of us did it, we would change the world. And on that note, we've got to take a break. Okay. And when we come back with Trudy Bauer, we're going to talk about what is the hunger paradox and what is hunger. And then we're going to dive into her book and hear more stories about her incredible life doing this great work of service when we come back with Trudy Bauer on the Edge of Every Day. Stay tuned, everyone.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargeman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours
On the Edge of Every Day. We are back with Trudy Bauer. Okay, well, we talk a lot about paradox, of course, here on the Edge of Every Day. The tension between opposites is the focus of our understanding of what the edge really is. And so when I read, when I was doing my research on you, when you said we need to talk about the hunger paradox, and to read it was such, again, such a stick over the head, like, wow. So the hunger paradox, I have a little thing that or I can let you say, what is the hunger paradox? So tell us, what is the hunger paradox?
Go first and see if our definition.
Well, it's that the hunger is on the rise, that we have enough food on the planet. We create and grow and have enough food on our planet to feed all 8 billion people. And yet we have all this food crisis.
Yes, well, that is absolutely correct. And actually, the term was coined by one of our former presidents, Dwight D. Eisenhower, in 1960. And from his experiences in war and traveling, he had observed there were hundreds of millions of people suffering from hunger and malnutrition, whereas countries like the US had these vast surpluses. And he had the brainchild to envision a multilateral institution, the World Food Program, part of the UN system, to help equilibrate the supply and demand, and donor countries would transfer their surpluses to the newly independent developing countries. So that his idea was implemented in 61 as an experiment, and in 63 it became instituted. And here we are, it's a 60th birthday year, and who could imagine the stars would be aligned that our book would come out the same year as the 60th birthday of the World Food Program. So it's really quite, it's a beautiful circle there. And the other hunger paradox was expressed by a current executive director, who's an American, former governor, David Beasley. And he was making the comparison between all the wealth generated during the COVID period. Like at the height of COVID, there was like $2.7 trillion in the stock market generated. And he was begging billionaires for $5 billion to save 30 million people from dying of hunger. That was his updating of the hunger paradox. So you see the extremes are becoming
more extreme.
More extreme and
Yeah.
Very sad, very, very sad. So that's the hunger paradox.
Well, on one of the websites that I in doing my research, it said, one of the questions was, what is hunger? Which I found that was again a really stark question, and that it's far more complicated than people, just being feeling hunger.
Well, it is feeling hunger. It's the body telling you you need food.
Of course, but
many different definitions. FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and WFP, they tend to say hunger equals undernourishment, meaning you don't have the energy, calories you need to live
malnutrition,
a healthy life. Now, nutrition is a vast array of definitions, like obesity is malnutrition. So there are many forms of malnutrition, but hunger, they tend to link it to calories for survival, the energy calories you need to survive. So that's
well, and I also appreciated how it talked about the interconnectedness of poverty and inequality and conflict, political conflict, and climate change and weak government and health systems, all of this driving, to understand the problems, the crises that we are all, like the climate crises, which we're going to get into as well, but that they're all linked.
Well, I was reflecting on your very complex question. And actually, the hunger crisis was a perfect storm of four threats, we call them in the emergency preparedness lingo. The number one cause of hunger today is conflict.
Yes.
And if out of every dollar that WP spends, 80 cents will go to the man-made disasters versus development, building capacity, supporting small farmers.
Yeah.
So 80 cents is going to saving lives due to conflict, which is a Band-Aid. It's not getting to the core issues.
Right.
Okay, so there's four causes of the global crisis. The number one was conflict. The second, the climate change events.
Yeah.
Actually, we noticed these trends in the 90s. We were 80% development and 20% emergencies in the 90s. And all of a sudden, between the war in Yugoslavia, and then there was drought in South Africa and drought in the Horn. So we were facing three mega emergencies at once, and we started having to plan for more big emergencies every year, and the donors were shifting their funds to emergencies. So practically overnight, we went from 80% of our funding to development to 90% to emergencies. So the development funds sort of dwindled, and that really was harmful to long-term sustainability, because the emergencies were saving lives, but then we had to move into we had a progression where we just didn't stop feeding. We tried to get them back into their livelihoods and support them with tools and seeds and resettlement and working with HCR to bring back refugees. But having, this development money to plant trees, to do more agroforestry and land reclamation, this is a function of also donor priorities, that they want food to be used to save lives first. And they felt food aid was expensive. However, since then, it's no longer in kind. It's over 60% cash. And we've really empowered the recipient countries and communities because we're buying the food either in the country or in the community from small farmers or in the region or internationally. So we're doing less of a transfer of our food to their country to using
Getting those systems in place for them.
so we're building markets for their production. And so it's very exciting how the aid paradigm has changed. So it's not transferring surpluses, but it's giving the equivalent in money. So you're improving, farmer capacity and market to market
Infrastructures. Yeah.
That's a hopeful comment in the middle of this conversation. But before the climate change, the second one is climate change events. So we haven't had all the funds to really prepare as I felt.
And why is that?
Because emergency.
Because nobody believed.
Yeah,
in it.
Because it was always a priority to save lives and move on and recover and move on.
Yeah.
But I think we see the same mentalities in all our governments in terms of prevention or repair of infrastructure. It always gets shifted and to deal with other priorities or to spend less money. But the long-term investments seem to be put off until something breaks and then they want to fix it. One thing I want to say, but for me, the climate
Connection.
this whole hunger crisis has just revealed the fragility of our systems, our institutions and our systems in all the areas. So before I forget them all, but I'd say the number one was conflict, then there was climate events and COVID, and then costs. So those were like threats that really decimated developing countries in terms of indebtedness, and they didn't have the COVID vaccines, so they were sick longer. And countries like China, the supply chains were disrupted. And the last one, of course, was the war in Ukraine, where Ukraine fed 400 million people and then became a beneficiary of food assistance because they have enough food to feed themselves. So we have all of these elements of this global crisis. And although the food and the sort of fuel prices have more or less stabilized, the elements of the fragility are still there. I mean, we've seen a lot of aggregated wealth, and a lot of the food chains and globalization has led to a few suppliers controlling all of it. And countries opt to bring in the cheaper grain import rather than investing in their own production, which we happened to be doing when I was there. In sort of the 2000, we were trying to produce rice in West Africa, and it was too expensive for us to buy compared to Asia. So our rules wouldn't allow us to buy it unless they met the parity in the international price. But that even the country couldn't afford it, so the government rather bring the cheap Asian rice in.
Oh my goodness!
So the supply chains have been severely disrupted by COVID, but they were already fragile. And as we know, globalization didn't benefit everybody, which is why we're having a lot of our struggles now with inflation and jobs and communities that disappear because the steel mills go out of business and things like that. So we've had a perfect storm, and I think we've seen the fragility of our institutions, our investment in public health, our emergency preparedness. I mean, we did pandemic preparedness in the late 90s, early 2000s. We did with the militaries, we trained all over the world, the UN, but then our country was not prepared, which was shocking to me.
Truly shocking.
So the final thing about storm is that if the number one cause is conflict, hunger is a failure of governance and political will, as is the climate crisis. It is a failure of government commitment and a political will. Until we can address these bigger root causes cannot be addressed.
Exactly.
And that's where
we cannot solve these issues without getting real.
As citizens, I guess we have to be vocal. We may have to sit out on the street like Greta Thunberg, or have a movement that will
Well, and I think that we do, but we have to be even more vocal.
speak
And
to.
this is a perfect segue. We've got to take a break. We've all got to become more vocal, even more vocal. And your book is a part of that. So when we come back, no, I know so. When we come back with Trudy Bauer, we're going to dive full on into her book that she's co-authored, The Hunger Crime and the Power of Storytelling to Educate. When we come back with Trudy Bauer on the Edge of Everyday, stay tuned.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we are back with Trudy Bauer. So I'm going to need you to unmute.
Here I am.
So congratulations. The Hunger Crime is here in the world on the 60th anniversary. Amazing. And what's also amazing is that you started writing this book in 2011 with your partner, John Krishy. Shout out to John.
Here's
We're thinking about you. We're celebrating. Oh, I love it. So, tell us the story. What was the motivation to write this book with John?
Many motivations. We started in 2011, we were both working, and it was the period when they had two of the biggest disasters in history. One was the Haiti earthquake, which happened in the capital, which decimated everything, the infrastructure, the banking systems, and it unfolded in 2010, and we were both in headquarters. So we were close to all of the nerve center of how the response was mounted. And then the next year we had again the Somali drought, which was a drought that had killed 260 million. So we say it's topical because now we're in a fourth year of Somalia drought, and there's still millions of people who are on the brink of famine. Mm-hmm. And Haiti is subject. It had another earthquake. It has gang violence. It has food insecurity. It has cyclones, hurricanes, and it's it's a really tough place. It's one of the most affected by multi-emergencies. So after 10 years, we haven't really made much progress in
No,
prevention, because these are political issues.
again, political will.
Place. I mean, they do have a weak government in Somalia, and Haiti has no government.
Yeah.
The time being. So these are really challenging issues, and also very unsafe countries to work in. So because we were there, we used these, inspired by all these true events of the stories of the people who worked there. Like, we ourselves did not work in those countries. I worked in Africa. John worked in, also Africa and a few places. But for these emergencies, we had the stories from our colleagues. So a lot of stories are based on true events. So we try to give the perspective of famine from the point of view of a village suffering from famine, and what their choices were. And particularly, we follow a woman named Suhila. The choice is to migrate or to die. And then they head to the border to try to get to the refugee camp. We have the protagonist Bentano, who leads a mission into Somalia and has an event there, and it's upended his life, and he's trying to deal with the collateral damage of all of the danger that he's been confronted with. And so it's also it's layered
It's a thriller.
humanitarian events, but it's a hero's journey as
Yes,
well,
indeed.
because it's how Bentano, he finds his way back to peace and hope and joy after giving away a lot and suffering and going through PTSD. So I think there's a little of this story for everyone really who suffered trauma. I think of the military, but we wanted this book to be highly entertaining because it is a crime thriller, very fast. It's a very light plot with the subtext of the hero's journey. So we wanted it to be exciting and like a roller coaster, but also against a backdrop of true humanitarian events. So I say it's about hunger and it's about hope. So we want to
There's the paradox.
want people to feel hopeful that this one man navigated his life and ended up on the other side, and how he's been inspired by all the other actors and his bromance with his African mentor. So it's
Interesting.
these are
Okay.
basically people we know, so they all know who they are. But it also was a community effort, because a lot of when in acknowledgements, we had a lot of our colleagues give their stories, and I read the early manuscripts and read the current manuscripts and do testimonials. So it's not just our book, it's the book of our community, and it's a window into our lives, our sacrifices, our commitments, and who we are as an institution and people working for this wonderful
The
institution.
legacy and the service that you have provided. You mentioned PTSD. Did you go through any of that in your work?
Oh, yes, I did.
I can only imagine. I mean, I'm chuckling, but my God, I can only imagine.
Well, it's not always the logical things. The things I mean, I went through 7 coup attempts. I went through 2, presidential assassinations, and the things that should have given me PTSD were not necessarily that, but there were a lot of events like my daughter's car accident where she could have died, and I was in Africa and I couldn't get good expertise, and things like personal things,
Right.
traumatizing. And I think those events, in trying to protect them in a bedroom when we have army going door to door looting and that kind of thing. So it was the trauma of trying to protect them that really took a lot out of me. When I was alone, I always felt safe. I always say, when in one of Jane Goodall's movies, she said that the snakes never bothered her because she belonged there. And I never felt personally threatened. But once I had children, I had to take care of the staff. I had to evacuate them from the office. Then I had to try to get home in the middle of these coups and pick up my kids at school. And there were a lot of conflicting priorities.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's also a woman's journey. And I'm hoping to do my memoirs because I didn't have an ending. But, you know, my story is also kind of interesting. And as I said, how women came up in the area of international humanitarianism, because at the beginning, women were not admitted to these professional positions.
Oh, my.
I mean,
And meanwhile, it's affecting the women and children the most.
yeah, well, I think it was the early 70s, CARE opened their doors to posting women overseas. And then the UN had a commitment to gender equality in recruitments. So that's when I started, 85, they were looking for women. And of course, I'd been in a sub office in Bangladesh for 2 years by myself. So I had the experience to show them I could do this, because they didn't believe that women could go out there. And they thought, oh, my first boss wouldn't let me travel because he said I'd be raped. So I had to like face him down, but in the end, we could do it. We did it.
Of course you did.
Apprehensions. What was really exciting, we had a female executive director. So she started mentoring and giving leadership to professionals. We got promotions. We got to be higher level managers. And at the other link to the chain, we're giving food aid, and she insisted that women become members of the committees, and they're written into our agreements, and the women became the card holders. So the food went directly in the hands of the women instead of the men, because the men might barter it for alcohol or cigarettes. So she revolutionized how we put hunger solutions in the hands of women, managers and as recipients. So it was an exciting time to see that in the 90s, because before, women couldn't get beyond the sort of low professional levels. There were no.
Is that still in place now?
No, she did a great job. Yeah. I think when I entered, it was 13% professional women, and now it's, I don't know what the figure is, but it's over 30% or 40%. I think that, you know, depending on the leadership, sometimes women don't always feel their voices are heard. It depends who's leading, and it depends who the influencers are. So you have, in other words, it's like democracy. You have to be vigilant, because your rights can be taken away very quickly. As
we have seen, with all of the bubbles that we have been living in have been popped. All of the strides that we feel are non-negotiable now.
Yes.
Have seemingly just, the rug has been pulled. So this is a great seg into your coming back into the country in 2016. You had shared with me, you know, how overwhelming and bizarre to come back into the United States when, you know, when all of this major political shift was happening here in the United States.
I have to say, when I had hoped to retire in Italy, because I'd spent 15 years there, because it's the headquarters.
Yes.
However, they started enacting these global taxes so that they would tax me as an American and as an Italian resident. So it got complicated. So I came back. I was away 40 years, and I didn't feel much like an American anymore. And when I came and I heard the rhetoric and the polarization, and it was very frightening to me, because I'd been through something similar in Ivory Coast. It was the most stable country in Africa. It was the motor of West Africa. And next door in Liberia, they'd had 2 decades of civil war, and they were warlords. But then the economy sort of had a downturn in Ivory Coast, and they started talking about the immigrants, and they're taking the jobs. Sound familiar?
Oh, my Lord, yes.
And I said, but I see it could happen here, because there's a north-south issue, there's ethnicities, there's religion. But I said, these men are professors, they are businessmen, they're politicians, they're smart men. They're not going to let it happen. They did. It spiraled into civil war while I was there. I went through 7 coup attempts. Then the country split in 2 into a civil war for 10 years. So after this trauma, I go to headquarters, and then I retire in 2012. And then in 2016, I come back. And it's almost like I'm reliving Ivory Coast. So I was very traumatized.
I'm sure.
So when they had
PTSD.
when they had the elections, this time I kept saying to everybody, get gas, make sure you have cash. I mean, I was ready. In many of these countries, when you prepare for an election, you stay at home and you prepare for anything. And then the January 6th event, where no one's in charge.
Right.
I had that feeling like no one's in charge. No one's coming to the rescue. It is the most frightening feeling in the world to be in a country, to be in danger. And I know how those people felt in there, trapped. No one's coming to rescue them. So this is I can't believe I'm living through this in my own country. It's heartbreaking because I thought my journey was over and the hardship was behind me. But coming here at this time, maybe there's something for me to do here. I'm not quite.
Well, there most definitely is. And you said
I am an optimist, and I don't get too down in the weeds. So I don't read a lot of the stuff I see on. I don't watch much TV. I don't read a lot of news because I just have to parse what I let into my brain.
Yeah. And
But
to
it's
stay
not
in service
like I
mode.
imagined in the US retiring. I've been more of a hermit than anything. So this could be my opportunity, and both of us, John and I, to find networks and find a voice. And this book, it could reach many people in different ways. We have our own community. It celebrates our community. And most importantly, it honors humanitarianism. I don't think I spoke about that, but I looked it up. It's the belief in the value of human life.
Human life. And
this is something I think I'm hearing so much about humanity. When Tyre was murdered, and the care, one of the spokespersons said, "You're going to see acts that defy humanity."
Yes.
So how we got to this point where human life has no value.
For some, has no value.
Yes.
Well, we have to take a break, Trudy. But this is it's really it in a nutshell. We're here. This where those of us with a voice, have to stand up and share it in a big way. And you doing this podcast and writing your book and getting your story out and using the power of storytelling to educate people. And for me to use this podcast as a platform, all in the service of these challenging times in which we find ourselves. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back for our last section, and we're going to find out where you can get this book. And it's launching on February 7th, and we'll share those details when we come back with Trudy Bauer on the edge of every day. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around.
back with Trudy Bauer. So The Hunger Crime by Trudy Bauer and John Krishy can be purchased on Amazon on the 7th. It launches February 7th, launches on Amazon, and you can get it, correct me if I'm wrong, for $1.99 for 24 hours, correct?
Correct.
So mark your calendars, folks. Run, don't walk to get this book on Kindle, on Amazon. I'm sure that there's a link on your website. thehungercrime.com is where you can find information about Trudy and John, and again, about the book, the inspiration, etc., etc. You are also on Twitter, TEB Talks, at TEB. I do my research, Trudy. Come on.
I don't know how to use Twitter, but I am on it.
I saw you there. It's all good.
I'm learning.
It's a beautiful thing, this learning curve of life, of getting our voices out in the world. I know social media can drive us a little insane.
Yes. I say I have one more voice to include in this conversation before we run out of time.
Oh, yeah.
Can I?
Of course, dive in.
Well, I have Mother Teresa, and I met her in Calcutta, and she's often with me in my sort of consciousness. But she said, and this spoke to me, we only know too well that what we are doing is nothing more than a drop in the ocean. But if the drop were not there, the ocean would be missing something. So in other words, every little bit we do matters.
Yes.
The gift that we are, the light that we bring. If you want to learn more, if you want to donate, the organization we worked for is WFP.org, or there's a WFPUSA.org. And we are committed to women's empowerment, girls' education, and school feeding programs. And we will see how we can support them further beyond advocacy. But right now we're doing advocacy because these programs are highlighted in the book as the means to the expansion of the women in the book, some of the women in the book.
Yeah, and the true solving of this issue, of course, through the women.
Yeah.
Okay. What else did you need? Other resources. That's what I wanted to. I quickly wanted to touch on your memoirs as well. Do you have any, time when you started those in 2015, any sort of sense of when that might be out in the world as well?
Well, I didn't get very far. I have 250 pages and I haven't gotten out of Ghana. So, so and I didn't have an ending, but I understand now if I write, it will show itself to me. So
of course, it is its own creative identity. I
hope now with this experience of the hunger crime, which really was meaningful to me. I love this story. So I don't want to say a date because I will start working on it this year, and in next year, the year after, I hope that I will have something that could be a legacy for women. I also didn't know the age groups of the people who follow you. That would be interesting because we wanted to try to reach a younger audience, the millennials coming up, what kind of leadership choices they're making.
Well, I have a diverse listenership.
That's good. Because we hope this will appeal to many different segments. But
absolutely. And I will continue to do anything, when the 7th comes around to promote this and make sure that I'm in contact with some of the younger women in my life. And I urge my listeners to do the same, to share this with the younger generation coming up. help them use this story, use the power of storytelling to educate on this, the vast web of these crises coming together. I mean, as we are seeing the system, all the systems breaking down, we've all got to use our voices to speak as to how we can rebuild. So we are 2 minutes to our break. I want to thank you, Trudy Bauer. We've included all of the places we can find you. You're also on LinkedIn, and you are on Facebook. So again, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, folks. And the hungercrime.com, February 7th, mark your calendar. Trudy Bauer, thank you so much for coming on The Edge of Every Day and sharing your story and your wisdom and your generous spirit. It's been a complete pleasure having you.
Well, thank you so much. It was lovely speaking with you.
And to my listeners, I thank you for spending this hour with me in honor of Les Miserables and your love of Victor Hugo. I am going to close our time together with a quote from him. Nations, like stars, are entitled to eclipse. All is well, provided the light returns and the eclipse does not become endless night. Dawn and resurrection are synonymous. The reappearance of the light is the same as the survival of the soul. And that is what your book speaks about, and that is what our work in the world speaks about. So thank you again, Trudy, and thank you to my listeners. Until we meet again next week, you are always at the edge of the miraculous. Take good care.
This is our last day.